Like, and that's the philosophy I have now is you can do literally you can do anything, right? It's just, you may not be able to do anything. Like, we can do anything. You got to have the right team. You got to have the right data. You got to have the acumen, the creativity, but you can do anything. The problem in today's world is you can't do everything.
This episode is brought to you by Green Skies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Green Skies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Green Skies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I am your host, Trent Russell, and today on the show we have Joe Earl. He's a director of internal audit at Sutter Health. I came across Joe and was interested to have Joe on the show because he had mentioned something about data literacy, and him being an internal audit. It's not a topic you hear a ton about from internal audit, although it is critically important and something that eventually will start to make its way into the audit profession. So you see it now within the data world and people who just work with data, rolling out data literacy programs, etc. And then, like most things, that'll eventually filter down into internal audit. So anyway, I think Joe's kind of ahead of the curve here a little bit. And some of the larger data teams in internal audit have initiatives like this already. So again, it's insanely important, especially now there's going to be AI literacy also, and the two kind of go hand in hand. But either way, so I was intrigued by Joe based on what he's done to develop his level of data literacy and how important that is, the impact it's had on him as an auditor. And so that's why we had him on the show. So from there, Joe talks about how he developed his level of data literacy, how it made him a better auditor, some use cases, some examples of this is what I can now do, or this is the benefits to doing it, and here's exactly how you can see that, as well as some of the resources that he used to develop his data literacy. In particular, there was a book that he found very helpful, so keep an eye out, or an ear out rather, if you're just listening to the audio for that. And with that, here we go. All right, Joe, what is in either your internet browsing history as of late, or your ChatGPT or Llama or LLM, like anything else, any other kind of LLM that you may or may not be using? What's in that history as of late?
Yeah, interesting enough. So I just going through and studying for the CISA exam, and so I was having some difficulty just kind of understanding encryption. And so I asked ChatGPT to explain it to me like a 5-year-old. And it was just kind of helpful there. So that's one of the items, as well as, also, looking at the summer vacation, doing some trip planning to Hawaii. So just kind of checking out some, different parks and recreation. So a little bit of both personal and business related. Yeah.
Travel is always a hot topic. Like whenever we ask that question, probably 80% of the time it's something travel related. So that's good. Good to hear you going to Hawaii. I hear it's a pretty decent place to visit for vacation. So that's great.
I think so. Yeah.
And then you mentioned the CISA. I remember encryption specifically. I laughed when you said that because I remember spending so much time on that. And this was 15 or 20 years ago, so certainly before LLMs. And I asked people that I worked with, I was like, do you get this? Can you explain this? And they're like, kind of like, I memorized it for the test, and that was basically it. No, all right, I feel like that's me too. The amount of time I spent studying for just encryption, though, relative to how many questions there were on the exam for that, made no sense. There's like 2 questions maybe, and I just remember at the end being like, I was so disappointed because I was like, I knew it at that point, and of course once I walked out of that room and took the test, I was like, I make room for other material. Right.
Yeah, no kidding. It's that fifth section, around the operations. That's the one that I'm least familiar with, just given my background as an operational auditor. But that's been the focus of the time. Kind of taking a look at encryption and firewalls and IPS, IDS, all that fun stuff. So I'm sure in real life it's much more fun. Learning it is a bit dry, but yeah, looking forward to sitting for that exam soon.
All right, cool. We'll keep
Yeah.
an eye out on LinkedIn for your, hey, everybody, I passed the CISA, and then we'll all make sure to jump there. Congratulate you. The reason that, not necessarily the entire reason that you're on this show, but the reason that I reached out to you is because you had, I believe, posted something on LinkedIn about data literacy and the importance of that. And I went, perfect. Audit guy, data literacy, understands it. We make a big push with data literacy. And so that was kind of what kicked us off. And so for you, how did you develop your own level of data literacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think, early on, right, if I go all the way back to my public accounting days, back in 2007, I remember working in IDEA, right? And, just doing some of the typical fraud stuff. And so I've always had an interest around analytics, around, technology. And so I think, as I've progressed throughout my career, I've just noticed that I usually have really great relationships with the folks on our team that do a lot of the keyboard, analytic type requests. And, I think over the years, as we've collaborated and, tried to get all of that business acumen and thoughts that, operational auditors contribute to, and working collaboratively with those analysts, kind of was reflecting and was like, hey, it would probably be good just to spend some time getting some dedicated training, from that perspective, right? Just to kind of help with that communication, which is, pretty important when you talk about data literacy, just as important as the critical thinking and the analytical skills. And so that's really a couple of years ago. That's I was working with our analysts in a work group, and I was like, I feel like I need to invest some time and kind of learn a little bit more about how to leverage Excel, how to even get some base understanding of SQL, so that I could take a look at some of the less complicated scripts and just kind of see the data that's being brought in and kind of the different sorts and filters that are being applied. So that's
And I realize now, we didn't really define data literacy for anyone that's
Yeah.
listening. Like, what the hell is he talking about? And for me, and you can, of course, there's like very academic definitions, and there's different, depending on the book that you read, they might define it differently. For me, it's kind of two different things, or two different areas. So one is being able to look at, we'll just say, an Excel spreadsheet, basically, and be able to go, oh, I wonder, I have this question about the data. I wonder if you could do this, or like if I filtered on this thing or sorted these from bottom to top, or whatever, what it would give me. But being able to just ask a question of the data. So maybe you don't necessarily know how to answer that question, and use joins and summarizing data and the functions and the specific functionality within any given analytics tool, including Excel. But to be able to go, hey, I wonder if or I got this other data set over here and I got this data set here. If I married those two together, join those two files together, that would then give me the answer to my question. And so for me, that's a piece of it, one piece, and the other is be able to actually put your hands on the keyboard, like you mentioned, Joe, and be able to go, okay, now I know I need to join this file, and this is exactly how I do it. So that's kind of what it is for me, is again, overall being able to look at a data file and being able to go ask a question of the data, and then whether you can execute on that to get the answer or someone else does it. But for you, what do you have broad definition that you would?
Yeah. I kind of think of it as being able to read, kind of read and critically think, about, an item, right? A subject, whatever it is. is, right? And being able to kind of, I think what you had described, just kind of the curiosity piece of get really curious with what you're trying to seek out, right? And how do we read, analyze, and communicate, right, with data, telling that story. So that's kind of how I think loosely I would define it. Obviously, there's a lot of critical pieces, both the to kind of get there, but very loosely, kind of that, reading, interpreting, analyzing, being curious, and then being able to communicate with tell that story.
Yeah, that's kind of the last leg, is the communication piece of it, which took kind of a long time for me to figure out also. I would do all the great work and then send it over the fence, and the audit team would be like, I didn't know what that was, man, so I didn't even use it. And so there's been a big push with storytelling, with data, and similar topics to get that last piece, which is, the most important. If you can't communicate it effectively, then there's really no point in doing it. But so your data literacy and the foundational elements of it came from basically your own curiosity. I'm going to go do this training. I see the value in it. I'm going to go do this myself. And then obviously a lot of organizations have a more formal program, like a programmatic way to develop data literacy within a group. Did you guys roll out any kind of initiative or program broadly to the team, or was it just kind of like, everybody kind of do your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all, not a program. I think we all realize the importance, but we've just not structured a deliberate program around that. Although there's encouragement from leadership and from those on the operational auditors, as well as the analysts, to get together at points throughout the audit, right? So we've got our methodology. We have built-in points of, pre-planning an audit. The team will connect with our analysts, and we'll kind of talk about, what the audit is, what kind of the objectives are, and kind of talk through, potential data sources, things of that nature. And so I would say, I mean, it is embedded in our methodology, and so that's been helpful. And I think what I've experienced with the teams, it takes a ton of collaboration, because you need that. With analytics, core piece of it is understanding the business, understanding what you're trying to do and the why. And I think that takes a lot of times a team when you're working in operational audits, right? And combine collectively, being able to get together, have our jam sessions. And then, everyone can kind of go and do their, contribute to their work, right? So, yeah, I would say methodology. So it's important there. But outside of that, and then some of just the internal training that we have done, I would say that's pretty much kind of our programmatic efforts. And then everything else has been, at the individual level, right? As folks are, wanting to upskill and, continue to expand their skills. We've got folks on the team that will, take different learning paths within, some of the resources that we have.
Okay. Yeah. And everybody learns differently. I try to explain this when, someone will reach out to me and go, hey, can you tell me how to get into analytics or how to upskill myself or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, of course, like, well, let's do it. But everybody learns a little bit differently. So, and different methods. So some people go like, I'm never going to read a book ever. Don't ever suggest a book. And I go, yep, all good. Some people don't want to do the, hey, I'm just going to Google around and watch videos and do it that way. Some people want a very, much more formalized online program through Google or MIT or some of these other free resources you can use. And hey, you get the certificate at the end, which is great. So everybody does it a little bit differently, but what are some of the resources that you found personally that were helpful?
Yeah. So, I mean, LinkedIn Learning is a resource that I have utilized. I've taken a number of classes on that, that have been helpful. I've read, Be Data Literate by, Jordan Morrow, which is a good kind of the first part of that. Journey was me kind of reading that. I am kind of a reader, and I prefer the book. I don't want an e-reader. I want the physical copy of the book so I can mark it up, highlight it, all that good stuff. Um, but what I find is that for myself, like I first like to watch a video, so the video learning, but it really doesn't sink in until you get the hands on the keyboard. That's what I need, and I don't need to be the expert, but I feel like if I can just get that base level of understanding, with whatever it is, an Excel function, or the other day I got moved into Power Query based on a ChatGPT kind of search. And so I started playing around with it, and I just feel like for me it just really helps to kind of get a data set in, and begin to noodle through it, and then for me to be able as a leader to kind of go, okay, how can I help others, right? One of the things that I've been doing lately is just the simple stuff in Excel, a pivot table chart, right? Just that extra chart piece. And when I'm in meetings and we're going through data, I'll have someone go, oh, can you actually make a chart, from that pivot table? It's just this easy. And I'll kind of, just direct them, partly because it's like I want to encourage and then show folks that, hey, some of these just slight changes in behaviors going from a table, which is text heavy, which I know auditors, we all love our pivot tables, but just kind of getting into that visualization using that pivot chart. If we can get them hooked on that, then, I think hopefully that will open up maybe a part, the part of the brain, right, that helps them kind of think creatively when we're collaborating with the analysts, because, we all have to have what data literacy is all about, right? We all own that. We all bring something to that, and the more that we can bring, the more well-rounded we'll be, and the better the outcomes will be.
Was there excuse me, was there a moment, like a light bulb moment where you went, oh, now I kind of get it? I know for me, and in talking to other data analysts, I've asked them a similar question, and they're like, yeah, we all have that story. And so for me, it was when, and I'm sure I've told this before, but is when somebody showed me how to use a VLOOKUP. And then eventually I used it to test all these, terminated users, thousands and thousands of people. And I was like, oh, that's how this works. Like I just did this. I tested every one of these in 15 seconds as opposed to taking a sample and doing it manually and all that. And I went, VLOOKUP, greatest thing ever. Side note real quick, because I just had this conversation with somebody this morning. I mentioned VLOOKUP and she's like, stop saying that. Like, I get it. People know that, but push people to the X lookup. And I went, all right, fine. So maybe this will be the official grave for my VLOOKUP references, and I'll start referring to X lookups. But either way, was there a moment where you went, now I get it? And again, to another example,
Yeah.
I was talking to someone and they said for them, it was when they were taking they like to do the formalized classes. So they like to go take classes at the local university or wherever it was online. And for them, it was when they joined to keep it simple, Excel files together. And so they went, hey, here's the primary key in this one. Here it is in this one. If I join these two together, then now I have all the vendor address information that I wanted that wasn't in my vendor, or my AP file. Now I have all that in there, et cetera. And that she went, now that kind of makes sense. So do you have a similar story?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would harken back to, like I said, I've always been fascinated with data. I think just that ability, if I think about it, I go back to 2007, 2008 at the firms where we were basically given an idea and they were like, hey, this is great technology, go do some of this testing. But that was about it, right? And so for me, I took that opportunity kind of to dig in. And I remember doing much more than the required steps, right? Because I was just fascinated. I think one of the things I was having trouble with our clients was they would send us PDFs, right? Which are, bad. And this is back a long time ago, right? So even PDFs were so much worse, and to deal with. And so I remember kind of like the flat file type of reports. And I remember going, gosh, I want to test this way. Just got these reports. Okay, how do you do it? And I was going through IDEA in the catalog, and there was this complex way to be able to read a PDF. And I remember playing around with it. And I got some help from a tech person as well. And at the end of the day, we were able to kind of do that. And it was just, it was eye-opening, right? It then became like, and that's the philosophy I have now, is you can do anything. Like, literally, you can do anything, right? It's just, you may not be able to do anything. Like, we can do anything. Yeah. You got to have the right team. You got to have the right data. You got to have the acumen, the creativity. But you can do anything. The problem in today's world is you can't do everything. And it's the prioritization, and it's the, hey, how do you systematize this, or how do you focus on the most prioritized item, as opposed to, hey, this world is an ocean, and having an attitude of, look, we just can't do it. There's too much. Like, no, let's start with the most important system. Let's learn a little bit about that, from whatever, for me, it's the audit focus. Okay, here's the couple key systems that we're going to use over and over. How can we build the relationships? How can we, understand the data, the processes, and have a, multidisciplinary team be able to support our audits, right? So, yeah. Anyway, so that to me is like, I've been a Google wizard for all my life, right? It's like, hey, how do you do this? Okay, let's get onto Google, the YouTube. And that's where I've fallen a lot. I have a lot of love for my ChatGPT, because I'm just like, man, I feel like with that thing, it's like my own personal assistant, right? Yeah. It just helps you be more efficient. And even the stuff that you maybe don't know how to do, it's like you can explain it, and it will. I mean, the new 4.0 or whatever, it helps out a lot.
Yeah, I find myself audibly saying thank you to the machine, like, oh my God, thank you so much. That was incredible. Thank you. It's like, kind of weird, but you mentioned something around, and what I kind of heard was there's not as much room today to play around with tools, technology, because of this hyper focus on prioritization and efficiency. And so what often happens that we see, especially with any kind of analytics or even an AI initiative, is like, hey, everybody go do this thing. Like, hey, we got the tool, now go do analytics. And everybody always accounts for the monetary budget, leadership. Yeah. I'm talking about sure. Audit leadership, but then they don't account for the hourly budget. And so we always tell people, account for the hourly budget, let people play around with the tools, like put that in the budget, X amount of hours per week, ideally, or every couple of weeks, whatever it looks like in your budget. And go, hey, look, everyone, you have X amount of time per, week, month, whatever it is. It is a priority that you learn this. So you might not be doing like this structured way of doing it. You might just be Googling things around, but like, hey, Joe, that works for you. And that's, that's kind of the way I like to do it also. I like a little bit of structure, but for the most part, like I rarely finish trainings because I'll get caught up on one thing and I rabbit hole and go, well, I can actually
blow it out already.
And then I go, well, I've got that problem and now I have a solution for it. Let me go build that solution. And then if I come back to the training and never finish it, well, that's fine with me because I built, something from it. And so I'm pretty okay with that. So anyway, we always give that advice. And then the other thing I wanted to add that I forgot earlier, you mentioned it, was using, I think you said something to the effect of data you're familiar with. And maybe not, but that's, again, another one we recommend, because if you have the context of the data itself, then it's a lot easier to, one, ask a question. If you give me some, I don't know, dividend data or something like that, I'd be like, what the questions to ask this thing. Yeah. I mean, inevitably I'd go to ChatGPT, but for me, the way I learned a lot of just the techniques and functions and joins and stuff like that, just fantasy football data. That's what I liked doing. And so I would always have, I had this one website and I could download all the data from there and I would import it and clean it. And then I'd have questions like, what QB should I take because of this? And what's the correlation between this thing and this, these variables. And ultimately, for those that are curious, analytics on fantasy football data yields no better result in your draft than it does picking pretty blindly. And so anyway,
subscription to Trent Russell, fantasy football.
Yeah. No. Fantasy football picker.com or something like that. No. There is, though, for those that are interested, there is, on a complete side note, it's called Beer Sheets, I think is what it's called, BEER Sheets. And so this
Okay.
person like does all this analysis, puts it together for you, and just donate like $5 to some charity that he runs or something like that, and you get it. And so I effectively just outsourced the
There
whole
you go. There you
fantasy
go.
football piece. So that's something else to consider also, is outsourcing that. So anyway, I thought that was important. I wanted to hit on that.
Yeah.
Other thing I wanted to ask you though is that as you've kind of like come along in your data literacy journey, how has that helped you be a better auditor in terms of communicating with the analysts and getting an actual result? And then do you have any examples of, I wanted this analysis done, I had this question of the data, the specific techniques that were used weren't my area of expertise, so I worked with the experts on that, and this was the end result? Any kind of use cases you could share where you went, because of my level of data literacy at that time, I was able to accomplish XYZ, whereas if I didn't have that, then nothing would have come of it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's nothing, nothing. Yeah, I guess an experience that I've had recently. It was, it was a very small team, a small audit. We were doing some work around wire transfers, and you know, we, we're working, and we're like, okay, what? And this was one where we actually wanted, because the data, we got it into Excel, and we actually were pushing our operational auditors to, again, try to do some of the, some of the more less complex data tasks themselves, right? To see if they would have that aha moment. And we're kind of working through that. And like for us, I mean, we pull down the data kind of in the scoping, look at the population just using, some Excel pivot table charts. And the person was kind of going through and saw a pretty sizable uptick in wire transfers. And, that got him thinking and got us thinking like, okay, what's going on here? This would be, something good to ask, right? And kind of started, poking down a little bit further. And what it did was when he went and spoke with the business process owner, it gave us just kind of a little bit more of an assessment of the current state. We were able to have an informed discussion with them, and we learned about a change in the business process, right? And so we caught that early, and then we were able to kind of build an audit program around that. That specific business process change, right? And so again, it wasn't anything complex or whatnot, but it was just a good example of, hey, anyone at the team at any level using some of these skills, it's going to help them be a better person, a better auditor, have more engaged conversations, because you've got, hey, this is, it's a descriptive analytic, right? It's something that has happened, right? Hey, let's talk about that. Let's understand the why, and then we can determine the risk associated with that and proceed accordingly.
There is, and you've hit on it too, the importance of understanding the business as being critical.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Probably told this story a ton too. I'll keep it short, but I asked a lifelong auditor who runs a consultant, little boutique consulting firm as an external audit type of thing, and I asked her, what's more important, knowing the business or knowing audit? And I thought, she has to sell her work as an auditor, so I thought, she's going to say audit to some degree, but then business, and kind of go back and forth. She didn't even blink. She went to business. Like, it's way more important to understand the business. And I think what the example you highlighted is evidence of this is analytics helps you understand the business, even so there's a framework called CRISP DM for analytics, machine learning, whatever you want to apply it to within the data world. And the first step is understand the business. Second step is understand the data. And then if you look at it, there's this kind of like cyclical image between the two, because as you understand the business, you understand the data better. That's when you get into the data, you go, wait, why is that thing like that? I don't remember. They didn't say that's how this thing worked. I thought it worked like this. And then from the data, you go back to the business and go, hey, we saw this in the data, just like you guys did, Joe. And they go, oh yeah, well, that's because it works like this, or we put this new system in, or this change, or whatever. And so it is very much the analytics piece does help you understand the business, which is arguably the most important part of what we do is knowing how the business works. So
yeah, I think that's the piece, like for me personally, kind of being on this journey. And, I would say, like, I'm not the typical auditor, right? A lot of people probably claim that, but I truly believe that. I'm a very social person. And when you think about like having an impact and really collaborating with the business, right, with management, being, having the data and being able to share the story and share, events that occur or whatnot, and to try to go, hey, how do we get better? How do we mitigate this from occurring in the future? I think for me personally, it's a lot easier being in some of those meetings with leadership when you take a data driven approach and you have those tools in your tool set, right? Because I think leaders, right, they like to have data in their decision making process, and so when the audit shop is incorporating that, I think you're having better conversations, better outcomes, right? A lot less pushback, right? I think they're seeking to understand, and that's where we kind of try to be very transparent and open. Hey, this is the data we got. This is where we got it. And walk and talk through that journey so that they have comfort, because they see a lot of errors in different reports or whatnot, right? And so we try to do a really good job of walking through and navigating that journey. And what we found is, there's just a lot more credibility and a lot of good collaboration the more and more you use analytics, as opposed to, hey, we found X out of X. Well, that's great. How big of a concern is that, right? And it's like, well, is it statistical? Is it not statistical? And that whole jungle, right? It's just nicer trying to look at that entire population when you can, right? Not something we're always able to do, but definitely try to apply it in every audit.
And the main purpose of the podcast is to get experts like yourself on and go, hey, tell us how to do this. So we try to make it more than just thought leadership of, hey, this is why you should do it. This is why it's important, but like how you should do it as well. And I'm kind of going on a different area altogether here. So hang tight with me, everybody that's listening. So you're in healthcare. You and I talked about this off air when we first talked. I know for me, and I ask a lot of healthcare, insurance, whatever kind of auditors this question too, and they're always like, I don't know, man, it's nuts. I get bills from the hospital when I go to the hospital, and it is the most confusing thing ever, because it's always like, do I pay this or do I pay this one? And then I get this third bill from somebody else, and am I supposed to pay that? Because certainly if I pay it, they're not going to be like, oh yeah, we owe you money, you didn't really have to pay that. And so for maybe to help the listeners in general, how do you know when to pay a hospital bill? Because it is utterly confusing to me on when to do that. And I just wait until I get the one that's in like all red that's like, hey man, you like really have to pay this one. And I go, all right, fine, I'll call you and pay you. But what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a ton of systems. You've got 20 different processes, a lot of different systems into play. And then you've got different folks, right? You've got the payers, the insurance companies, the providers. And so for me personally, I don't pay, I pay a bill once I've seen that the claim has been adjudicated, right? That your insurance, has taken effect. And if you do have any, you're like, hey, I don't think this is right. Calling up the number, because before I write a big check, that's what I'm doing, just to make sure, right? Like, hey, help me understand my evidence of coverage, right? What did the insurance cover and all that? I'll tell you, myself being in healthcare, I and being someone who could read a contract, it's challenging, right? Like, and then God forbid if you get a denial, right, and the where your insurance doesn't cover it, and you're like, hey, what's going on here? Yeah, hopefully we can get better at that. But there are a lot of parties and a lot of processes involved to get that right.
All right, so I think auditor or otherwise, that piece of advice that you gave is fantastic, and a little bit of insight on how all of that works relative to hospital billing and why it is so confusing. So thank you very much for that. Is there anything else, though, Joe, that you want to leave the audience with before we call it a day?
Yeah, start whatever you want to do, right? Start today. There's no better day than today to start. And there are a lot of resources out there. And if you need, someone live, get on that LinkedIn and connect with them. I know, I've taken the opportunity to do that, and it's very valuable, right? Start today. And I wish, for me, I think with anything, right, I think there's that building up, getting that confidence. And what I've learned through my years is taking that first step is the hardest. And then once you're there, you just kind of begin to build that momentum. So, if this is an area of interest or others, I would say just get started, right? And reach out and find the support that you need. So there you go.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.